it's by building the community with skills through education. But just to get to that point where there's an understanding of the difference between education and development versus delivery of humanitarian aid is a major obstacle that's a part of a lot of conversations. There's a lot of Malawians that struggle with the difference, and there's a lot of Americans that struggle with that difference as well.
Just to give an example, and Joel mentioned that we're going to take the Worship at the Cross service that you just saw, and we do have it already written in Chichewa. I was tasked to send those English ones over there, and I sent them out 8 weeks before Katie and her team left. It was a skid about this big, 200 pounds. It got there in their 8th week. It got delayed at the border 2 different times by customs. And when final bill came for that small little 200-pound skid, it was $2,200. And so that, what Bill just explained, there's obstacles that way too, on how do we get these things over there, that even from a teaching aspect, from sharing God's words aspect, how do we get them over there so that we can continue to move the work along? So for 8 weeks I kept going, what do you mean they're not there yet? And finally they get there, and of course their time is done. But we've learned from that, and now, you know, we equip it and figure out how do we get it over there, and how do we get it over there efficiently and on a timely basis.
I think to Bill's story on that is that we've learned that we can do work over there and engage Malawian people, and it obviously has an economic benefit as well, instead of us doing printing here in America, to be able to do it there. So it's a very simple lesson, but it was a $2,200 lesson. So we've learned it. And so I'm going to start and turn it open. This is a great opportunity to really throw some questions at this group here, and we'll start back here. And Carl's coming with a mic.
I'm Galen Summer, and I've worked with the DD population for about 30 years in the Twin Cities. And more recently, many of my employees, probably most of them, were from Africa. Wonderful workers, typically probably from a colony that a country that had been colonized by Britain. So they were educated people. Some of them were involved politically in their country in high offices. Most of those people, I never heard that comment about, so I was wondering if this is true all over Africa, that disabilities were looked upon as people demon-possessed. Most of my employees had a in many ways were better than Americans in dealing with people with disabilities, because they had really a great compassion for working with people with disabilities. Plus, they always had this feeling that, what if that happened to me? Not that they had become disabled, well, probably disabled in some other way. They were very caring people. So is that feeling of demon possession kind of throughout Africa?
Okay, I think we had a discussion, and Bill and Pastor Gertner maybe.
Yeah, there's sometimes the socioeconomic differences and gaps in education are stronger indicators of a person's worldview than just their country of origin or their culture. And within Malawi, if we're just to keep the conversation there, in the cities, people that have been to college, that have degrees or even graduate degrees, are less likely to believe a person with Down syndrome is demon-possessed or cursed. A person in the village that hasn't completed primary school education is much more likely to believe that person with Downs is demon-possessed or cursed. I mean, another part of the demon possession is the black magic curse as well, that the reason a person is born with a disability is because their family was cursed through magic. And that's as prevalent as the demon possession. But in any case, that curse still implies that this person with a disability has no soul. If you get into the higher socioeconomic, more educated demographics of any African country, there is going to be a different level of understanding, but still growing up with that is going to affect the educated person. That deep down inside, that still exists in the back of their minds. They know that there's a possibility that there was some black magic somewhere and it may have affected somebody somehow, but it's not going to be as strong.
I think what you said, Bill, is so true. I can't remember how many different times as we were going out to the bush congregations, Stefan Felgenauer would point out to us, he said, look there's a witch doctor stand set up alongside the road. The one that really struck me was the first congregation we visited, the congregation at Fissy. We were outside after the Worship of the Cross service, meeting with the different groups of people with disabilities, and Stefan said, look over there. And less than 100 yards away from the Lutheran Church of Central Africa church building was this stick that went up in the air, and it sort of had all these weird things going off of it. And he says that's where the witch doctor lives. And you talk to the American missionaries, you talk to the national pastors, and that is something out in those bush congregations that they constantly wrestle with. You have people who have come to know Jesus as their Savior, but yet it's been so ingrained in them, this whole thing with the witch doctor and that they sometimes have a hard time giving it up. So I think that socioeconomic thing is a big part of it.
Most of these employees were Christian and probably of Anglican background. In the later years, there might have been a Muslim or two that were employees too.
Okay, other questions that we would have? Feel free to raise your arm, get the mic to you. Any questions that you'd like to have? Yes, back in that corner there, if we could.
I'm curious to hear more about the language barriers. Do very many people there speak English? And how do you deal with communication?
Question is about language barriers and how that's overcome. Katie's going to take this.
I would have to say, the language barrier is very prevalent, and of course, we rely on communication when we go over there when you are teaching. I think personally what I found is that a lot of the pastors from the different bush congregations had at least a little bit of a background with English. But as far as teaching the volunteers and working with the disabled people goes, we relied heavily on our translator, and the biggest barrier there is that it slows everything down, which, in some ways is good. It gives you time to really thoroughly develop your thoughts and get the point across as clearly as possible. So,
I would have to second that whole thing. I've talked about this, and I said you really have to keep focused on what you're saying. There's a number of different times at the Titsalarana Shelter or at the Titsalarana Disability Club, I had the opportunity of devotion and then a couple of the congregations to speak. And when you have to speak one sentence at a time in English, and then they translate it into Chichewa, and you wonder if it's being translated accurately, and then you have to remember, okay, what was the next sentence I was going to say? And it sort of goes on like that for about 10 or 15 minutes. But the neat thing is, and I really saw this when I had the opportunity to do the devotion at the Titsalarana Disability Club, when you get down to the simple message of Jesus, the power of God's Word works through. That was just really neat to see when you've got 150 people sitting there on a Tuesday afternoon, and I had Dave Dewey, who very likely is going to become more involved in our Jesus Cares work over there, translating for me. And you saw the reaction of the people out there that day. The message was getting through in spite of the language barrier.
Okay. Question there, yes.
Our congregation is probably has the ability to give some money toward this, but we also want to know, given the shipment, sometimes there's added fees on, and what is the accountability level of giving money, and how is it accounted for? If we give money to you, do you give it to the people there and know that it's going to be going toward the program? Or how does that work? Because, you know,
Great.
sometimes it just goes and we don't know what happens to it.
I think it's an excellent question, and it's as we talk about our collaboration, we have a lot of conversations about how this funding is working, but I'm going to turn it over to Bill to kind of explain a little bit about how we utilize, and from a resource standpoint, into the country. And I think there are still some unknowns as well, but Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, and great question. We have a joint treasury in this case that's dedicated to the Malawi Disability Collaborative is what we call it. The TLHA and Kingdom Workers share this treasury and send financial reports back and forth as money is received by each organization. And both organizations receive money that has a designation that says Malawi Disability or something, or JCM Malawi or something like that. This fund receives a little bit of a challenge grant from a foundation. In addition to the volunteers that go over, each raise money for the disability ministry as well. That goes directly to the cost of their visits. All of this is kept in this one single fund. We also give financial reports to some of the major donors that request them. In fact, one was just delivered this week to one of the donors. It's basically last year's financial report for the Malawi Disability Ministry Collaborative. So it's a matter of us. We always maintain an accurate set of financial data as well as continual activity reports, and we are very happy to share both with any donor who requests the information.
I think the question also gets into how do you best use resources there locally, and those are the areas that we continue to work on as well and develop. We have a question in the back.
Yeah, I'm just curious with the elderly there, are you seeing signs of dementia, and how are they treated as they age?
Okay, the question is, how are individuals with seniors treated as well as individuals with dementia?
You know, to be honest with you, we didn't see hardly any old people over there because the life expectancy is 52.
Right now, the current life
So,
expectancy is 52.
You know, the people that we saw, I know when we met with a group that had HIV and AIDS, they looked like some of them could have been 70, 75, but I know they weren't. Obviously, they wouldn't live that long, but people over there just don't, and I don't think they even know what dementia is because they don't live long enough to even get to that point. So, yeah.
I could add one more detail is the Malawians who do live into their later, what we would consider later years beyond 60, 70, are highly respected in that their society has a great deal of respect for elders. And so in my time there, I did know a few people that were great grandparents, that type of generational age, and their families took very good care of them because of the value systems in their culture for their elders.
Thank you. Back over here.
I was wondering if you could share a few more stories. I know it's something that's difficult and always a challenge here to empower people with disabilities to take ownership and become part of groups and clubs and policy making and that kind of thing. Can you share some stories of people that you saw and worked with disabilities that started to take some ownership and wanted to be part of even sharing the message of Christ? And it'd be great to give us a few more examples of that.
I'll share one that touches back to the work that Katie and her team did. One of the things that they had the opportunity to do there was Nathan Lersch, who is currently out as a vicar this year, got to baptize a young man by the name of Cedric. When we got done visiting with the team at Cedric's congregation, we walked just around the corner to the village where Cedric lives. And we all, we knew the whole thing, and I made sure I got a picture of Cedric so that Nathan saw that he, is still a baptized child of God. But what we saw there was, you talk about care and those types of things. Cedric is living with his aunt, who is in her early 60s, because both his mother and father have died. That's often one of the biggest things. You know, once you get past the whole stigma and getting that person out of living in the family goat pen, or even get them some nourishment, as Bill Meyer alluded to, giving, you know, having the resources to be able to care for that person. And that's sort of that fine line, as Bill was alluding to. We don't want to get into the whole humanitarian aid thing, but sometimes giving that family member a few simple things. There's a couple times that we saw Stefan Felgenhauer give the family member soap to enable them to care for this. But that's part of where the training that I talked about and further train is going to really help these family members understand how things go and what we can do to help them. That's sort of a common theme, one right after the other, that we saw that whole thing, and that's why when the JCM Malawi advisory team said, hey, can you come over and provide some further training, and as we've talked about the plan, that's going to be a big part of it.
Okay. Other questions? Carl's over there. Oh, go ahead, Bill.
I can just add one more example to the last question of what we might call a positive story. The Tidzalarana shelter and the Tidzalarana club, they existed before we embarked on this large challenge of disability ministry in the Lutheran Church, and we've learned a lot from them. Stefan in particular has learned a lot from what Tidzalarana has established. And in that case, the community truly has taken ownership of the ministry in a way that I didn't ever see when I lived in Malawi. Some of the residents of that shelter are teenagers or younger, and kids from the community come and pick them up and take them to school every day for either they're special education students at the school, which to me was unimaginable when I lived there. I couldn't imagine that happening, but that community integration has taken place in that one tiny, Connie, I think correctly referred to it from our perspective as a slum. They don't think of it as a slum, it's their neighborhood. But that's a place where that shelter is accepted and protected by the community. They don't have problems with thieves, which you normally would. And they've got a lot of community interaction where there are people from the community that come and pick up residents, take them to places in town, and that becomes an ownership that the community has developed, which I think is remarkable. So,
Bill, can you just expand on it a little bit from a government and policy making? Is there hope that the government is going to be more engaged and supportive of this area as well? I think that was one of the questions that the individual is trying to get at as well.
I'd say there's hope, but there's a couple of realities, and some of them are tied to over the past 20 years, things that have become important to one sector of government or another at one time or another usually don't always produce great results because they don't have enough money to pay for the training that they need. And there's always a lot of corruption involved, and then there's a change in the government and everything changes. The entire bureaucracy changes. So there's a sustainability issue there where right now there is a major push for disability awareness and community integration in Malawi. I mean, there really truly is a sincere desire on the part of their president to cause that to happen. They just tried to do a couple of things that were significant and got a lot of attention, but I don't know what kind of long-term impact they're going to have because as Stefan has learned, he visits with the people in the community offices who say, yeah, we're supposed to go out and do this training, but I don't have a vehicle and I got no way to get out to the village.
Thank you. Carl?
Oh, okay. This is probably directed at Connie, and she's just going to kill me. No, I personally have gotten very acquainted with Connie, so we have talked about things. But I never asked you, Connie, with health issues, you talked about malaria and HIV and all this. I'm so happy you're all back here and healthy. I'm concerned, are there precautions that you explain and go through to all of those who have traveled there?
Yeah, we had to have a series of shots or vaccinations before we went over. I think it was Hep A. I had some of those already for nursing. I think it was Hep B, and okay, I don't think I had that one. So who knows what I'll be.
Missed that one, huh?
And then also, now, depending on which clinic you go to, they may treat differently preventatively for malaria. But I did have 5 weeks of doxycycline that I was on, which I started before I went, just oral doxycycline, and then I took that for 5 weeks. So, I think, malaria is quite prevalent over there. At first, I was a little fearful of it and did I make sure that I had my mosquito spray on at night, and of course we always put the net down, but you just kind of get, I don't know, after a couple days it really wasn't something I was that concerned about, although Bill did say he has had malaria, so it does happen, but we did take the proper precautions and had the vaccinations before we went over, so I guess for myself personally, it's not something that I really am afraid of or am concerned about.
Okay.
I didn't have any fear of it, took all the same shots. I just said, Lord, whatever happens, happens. I put some trust there. But the other thing is and I think, Bill, you can help me here if I'm wrong, but if you do contract malaria, the medication for malaria over there is extremely inexpensive. And as a safety precaution, Stefan took us to the pharmacy before we left and bought the malaria pills we need for $15. Whereby if we had to buy those same malaria medicines here in the United States, they would be in the $400 or $500 range. So it just kind of gives you another little perspective on the differences from the social economic situation. But for $15, I thought, I'm throwing them in my suitcase. If I get it when I get home, I got them. So you take precautions, certainly, but we're all still up here.
All right, good.
I do have another
Question over here.
Yes, I was wondering if you had investigated or considered electronic media for conveying the JCM materials versus hard copy. The reason I ask is that I know there are some, I'm vaguely familiar with some equipment that's solar powered for projectors and computers that are used in some remote areas, and recently was made aware of some economic development that's being done in some, actually in Africa, with Maasai herders, where there's some development being done, and they have mobile phones that they use for doing electronic currency in remote areas. So the world is shrinking electronically. Just wondering if that's a possibility, or if you've considered something like that.
Yeah. Bill?
Yeah, I just, in November, was able to participate or witness, they've got the little handheld projectors that are just a little bit bigger than an iPad. They're thicker, and they're still struggling with the power source and trying to get something compatible. At least this group was that I saw working with. And I think people within our fellowship are trying to use them in Nepal right now with multi-language publications. So the system is developing. When I've spoken just briefly about using it in Malawi, there's a lot of concern about it's just going to get broken. It's just going to get broken, and so that we have to overcome that. We'll probably have to have 2 or 3 systems broken, and suffer some of the consequences before everyone learns. We really got to take good care of these things, but I think it's possible. The other thing that has to be dealt with is the projection really is better in a darker area. At least the ones that I saw. And most of the disability activities, whether we're doing worship at the cross or even if we start doing some training and we use media for that, to create a really dark environment during the day in Malawi is as difficult as creating a light environment during the night in Malawi. So it's, but I believe that's the proper long-term, it's a good long-term objective. So thanks.
Back here.
Oh, yeah.
Joel, did you want to add to it?
Just a couple follow-ups on that. You go to most of the congregations and even the bush villages, there's no electricity whatsoever. The one thing that struck me is a couple times we would come out from the bush villages and we'd get to the main road, and here there's a person who somehow they've got an electricity source. They've got like a car battery in that. And what they're doing is charging people to tap in and charge their cell phones. So that's about, right now, like you said, long-term, maybe there's some more possibilities, and I would love to see it. But right now, even getting that technology into the villages is a ways off.
Bill?
And the other thing from the digital standpoint, just to follow up on that, though our dear Christian friend, our 110 Bible lessons with all the picture symbols, the concept of it can work over there. Some of the pictures aren't right, so we need to change it to match their culture, but also have to translate it just like we've done with the worship service. We need to get those lessons, and maybe not all of them, but enough of them translated into Chichewa so they're usable in that format.
Okay. Question back there?
I think this is probably for Carol. I'm just curious, if you were with the mobile medical unit, are they going to be able to have any type of assistance for this program?
We've been in dialogue about training some of the Lutheran Mobile Clinic staff to participate right now, and at this point, we haven't gotten any buy-in. They're focused on what their core mission at those mobile clinics, but it's our desire that instead of hiring or training a couple of medical professionals to be a part of this rehabilitation program for disability, that we collaborate with the Lutheran Mobile Clinic and train some of the Malawian staff there to participate. That's our desire.
I think we have time for a couple more questions. Yes?
What is the role that the Native Lutheran Church of Africa and the missionaries having with your Jesus Care program?
Okay, the relationship of the local church and their missionaries. Joel?
The Lutheran Church of Central Africa leadership is well aware of what we're doing. That's one of the neat things with having Stefan Felgenauer. He has been on the ground and has that relationship with the missionaries already. So as we've set up this partnership, all the communication has gone through Stefan, and he has communicated with the missionaries, hey, this is what is going on. The interesting thing, and a lot of people maybe are aware of this, our missionaries, their main job over there is actually training the native Malawians. So they train them, and they're very supportive of what we're doing and aware of it. But that's, that's where the involvement ends. In the 5 congregations that are currently trained, the pastors are all actively involved. I mean, if you look at that picture of the Malawi JCM advisory team, there are 3 out of the 5 congregations pastors on there. So with the congregations that are trained, the pastors are already trained. It's now going the next step and getting more of the congregations trained. But that's one of the things as part of the plan is we don't want to expand this so quickly that we don't have the capability to train everybody. We're going to focus on these 5 congregations and then probably pick another 3 or so after that. And the goal is really that we're not doing that training, that we have so trained the Malawian workers that they can train their fellow Malawians.
Katie, did you have something?
I was just going to say, too, that when we were there, often, at least for half of the day, usually Thursday afternoon, the villages that we visited, the men of our group would actually sit down with the pastor one-on-one, and oftentimes with Stefan as well, to really immerse the pastor in the training. We always encourage the pastors to come and attend the training with the rest of the volunteers from the churches. But specifically, we asked them to be there at least one of the days so that the guys could really meet with him one-on-one and just immerse him in the information.
Bill?
After the initial assessment, and actually what I did when I went was shared with all of those Lutheran Church Central Africa pastors this concept. It was just 3 weeks later that our missionary pastor John Holtz and the pastor at Fizzy Lutheran, 3 weeks after I left, he just on his own started as Jesus Cares without any training. He just took the concepts that I shared in an afternoon at the Lutheran Bible Institute in the Long Way and went back up and said, nope, we're going to start this. And so that one was up and running just after one sharing of the concept and the ideas.
Okay. We have one question. Anyone else? Otherwise, I'll wrap this up with a question here, and anyone, 5 to 7 years, what does this look like?
In 5 to 7 years, the vision is that the congregations and the members and the pastors that we're working with in 2013, 14, and 15 are leading the propagation of the ministry throughout the entire Lutheran Church of Central Africa. There's 145 congregations, and right now there's, I believe, 32 pastors. My prayer is that all 145 congregations have an active disability ministry that is holding worship, but also creating a presence in the community, advocating for everyone with disabilities and integrating them into the community, all motivated by the gospel, and all sharing or being salt and light in the community as they do this. So I believe that we will be involved for at least another 5 years in that propagation, but at that point, my prayer is that if we are involved, it's literally only to share in the joy of a propagating ministry.
Thank you. Well said. We have one last question. We'll make it really quick here. Don, you want to give me how much time do I have left, or am I way over already? 2 minutes? All right. We have 2 minutes.
I know from church history that the early Christian church grew when Christians would adopt babies that were exposed on the hillside. Pagans would see that happening and realize there's a real force at work there that's not present in their pagan religions. Could you anticipate that happening in Malawi? And secondly, if you know, what's the contrast to that with Muslim regions and their care for disabled, if there was any knowledge on that?
The one thing we're seeing already is, just like Jesus Cares Ministries here in the U.S. is an outreach ministry, every one of those congregations that is doing Jesus Cares, they are finding people who aren't already a part of their congregation as they're having that openness to reach out to people with disabilities. I can't speak so much on the Muslim part of that, but the one thing that Stefan did share with us is that is going to be a challenge, I think, as we go forward. The Muslim influence is becoming stronger and stronger in Malawi, so that's something we're going to have to wrestle with down the road.
Okay, thank you again for a wonderful panel. And from my standpoint as a Lutheran Home Association being involved, this has been a tremendous opportunity to collaborate around ministry. One of our values is being a learning organization. As I expressed here, one of the we don't know if this will happen exactly, but there is going to be a massive caregiving shortage in the United States as well. And we have had in the past Philippine nurses from Estonia and the like, and we can see the opportunity for possibly individuals to come over and experience our care and services and take that knowledge base back to Malawi as well. And whether that occurs or not, we're not sure, but we wanted to keep that in the back of our minds as well, because quite candidly, we're worried about how are we going to take care of our disabled and senior population in the United States, and we're going to have a massive caregiving shortage in the coming decades here. So that's one of the pieces that's also part of this. Again, thank you, panel. Outstanding job. So let's please recognize them.